Hello, everybody. This is Jeff at Divine Cosmos, and welcome to the next installment of my question and answer series. I've been receiving quite a few questions from my readers and followers of my blog and my YouTube channel, and today I'm going to share my perspective on a whole series of questions that a reader of my last question and answer installment, question and answer 2, asked as follow-up questions to that. So her first question was, why does there have to be a higher self? Couldn't source consciousness itself organize all of a soul's experiences? I think in one of the questions I answered in question and answers 2, I discussed the structure of source consciousness and how the oversoul and the soul work in relationship to incarnations and everything like that. So she was asking this question in that context. The interesting thing is that source consciousness is a singular yet multi-threaded, multi-level composite consciousness. What do all those terms mean? You've probably never heard multi-threaded composite consciousness before. This is the terminology I use in explaining the model of the consciousness system as I understand it. There's really only one consciousness, but it has the ability to subdivide its consciousness into many threads so that it can be doing more than one thing at a time and has more than one focal point of perception. And this ability to subdivide its consciousness is generic. So when it creates a subthread of its consciousness, that thread can then subdivide itself further, creating like a family tree of threads of consciousness with many levels in it. What people call the higher self or the oversoul is a level of consciousness fairly far down in the family tree of consciousness that spawns souls or spawns sub-threads of its consciousness that we call souls. And the reason why the oversoul creates subthreads of its consciousness is for the purpose of incarnating into the lowest levels of physical realities. Souls are aspects of or subthreads of their parent oversoul's consciousness, their higher self. Therefore, it's the oversoul that has the primary responsibility for managing souls, but just the souls that it spawns as its subthreads. Because, after all, they are a part of it. It created them, and other oversouls are responsible for the souls that they spawn. If you want to learn more about the multi-threaded, multi-level composite structure of source consciousness of the consciousness system, check out my article called The Multidimensional Self, the Soul, the Oversoul, and Beyond on my website. I'll put a link to it below this video or this article for you to follow. So basically, Source uses a strategy of subdividing itself as a way of delegating all the tasks that it's engaged in, creating many, many realities and experiencing all those realities. Remember that every thread of source consciousness, every oversoul, every soul, and every higher level of consciousness within the consciousness system really is source consciousness. Source consciousness is playing all the roles in all the realities. Each one of us is a thread of source consciousness. So subdividing its consciousness and delegating various tasks to those subdivisions is just basically how it gets things done. All right, here's the second part of, well, the second of her follow-up questions. When a soul reintegrates with its oversoul, what happens to the personality of the soul? Does it vanish? Is it lost? Is it no longer conscious of what it has been? Does my personality no longer exist? Yes. When a soul completes the evolutionary journey that its series of incarnations into various realities provides and reintegrates with its oversoul, its parent level of consciousness, its associated personality dissolves and it merges with its parent's consciousness, with its oversoul's consciousness, its greater consciousness. I know a lot of people find this idea disconcerting at first, at least until they fully realize that their oversoul is them. It is the greater them. They always have simply been a part of, a sub-thread of their oversoul. The personality that develops within an incarnation is mostly a product of the specific body and circumstances that that incarnation provides, and the specific limited unique circumstances that that incarnation provides that soul during that experience. Maybe some of the personality quality, a very small part of it, derives from the essence of its oversoul, but mostly it's just a product of that specific incarnation. It's important to realize that the integration process with your oversoul is experienced as an expansion. It is experienced as becoming your higher self, your lesser self, the specific personality that was formed by that very limited singular experience of that incarnation, and its very limited consciousness simply fades away gradually, and it feels like your consciousness is expanding into something much bigger, something with much more knowledge and experience and wisdom. In a sense, you become your oversoul, and you were always just an aspect of your oversoul to start with. Nothing is lost. All the experiences of your soul are recorded for all eternity in the field, in the Akashic records. All the knowledge and wisdom that your soul gleaned from the experiences of the many lives and incarnations it has are incorporated into the consciousness of your oversoul, of its oversoul. And the exact mix of attributes that your oversoul used to spawn your subthread of consciousness, your soul, is also recorded within the oversoul. I already said this once, I'm going to say it again. So believe it or not, an oversoul can reconstitute a soul that reintegrated and no longer exists in individuality at any time it needs to. And that reconstituted subthread of its consciousness, that reconstituted soul, child soul of itself, is literally exactly the same. This happens, not that frequently, but it does happen. Sometimes the skills and attributes of a particular soul acquired through the sum of all of its experiences, all of its lives, would be perfect for some other task. And that soul is resurrected for the job. A similar and also amazing thing is that an oversoul can create a new soul that is a blend of all the skills and attributes of two or more prior souls that had spawned and that reintegrated with it. So it can create a new soul that is a blend of skills and capabilities and attributes of a whole bunch of prior existing souls for some specific task. Hard to imagine what the oversoul's up to. Believe me, There's a lot more going on than you can imagine. So here is a third question, or a third part of this reader's question. What if a soul after incarnation does not want to incarnate anymore? Are there any other options of what a soul can do in the afterlife or whatever? So a soul is an aspect of its oversoul, and there is a very cooperative arrangement between them because of this. Generally, their goals and purposes are aligned. I mean, the soul is a subthread of the oversoul's consciousness, and the oversoul specifically created it. It's a part of itself for a specific task or experience. So you can imagine that there may rarely be any disagreement or misalignment between a soul and its oversoul. But I imagine that an oversoul would honor the wishes of one of its souls, one of the parts of itself, because that's what a loving, wise, compassionate consciousness would do. There are more than a few misconceptions about the quote afterlife that I gotta discuss to fully answer or address your question, the question of this reader. Although there is a level of reality that can be used as an environment for the soul to review an incarnation just experienced, to regroup and to plan its next incarnation, that reality is just the staging area for these, what I would call interlife activities that I just mentioned. When a soul has completed its series of lives or incarnations in this reality or whatever reality it's incarnating into, it reintegrates with its oversoul, which is just pure, formless, non-physical consciousness. So that reality that we pass over to is actually a temporary staging area, an interlife reality that allows us to do the review and the planning preparation for the next life, and isn't the final reality. It's just a staging area. There are many, many levels of reality. There isn't this reality and the afterlife reality. It's far more complex than most of us have ever imagined. And I may have discussed some of this in some of my other articles. And I'm discussing it more in my upcoming book, The Ground of Existence, which hopefully is coming out before the end of the year. So stay tuned for that. But I want to mention something that I didn't mention in my last thing I said, which is that there are actually two options for a soul that's returning to its oversoul. The normal option is the full reintegration, where the soul thread completely dissolves and merges with its oversoul. And this other option might be called partial reintegration. And it's pretty much the same thing as full integration, except that the subthread of consciousness, that is the soul, is not dissolved and continues to exist within the consciousness of its oversoul, but is not engaging in any more incarnations, and is not experiencing any reality. It's simply a part of the oversoul consciousness. If the oversoul is experiencing another level of reality, perhaps that thread of consciousness within itself is aware of that. I'm not sure if it is directly aware of that or not, but essentially that thread would simply be inside of the oversoul's consciousness, ready for some other duty at some future time. And the purposes for doing that are well beyond the scope of this conversation. And I'm not even sure if I fully understand why a partial reintegration would be used. So believe it or not, after I shared my thoughts about her question, she came back and asked further questions, which I'm going to answer right now. So her next question was, why can't Source spawn and manage souls directly? Why does it need helpers? So she wanted more clarification about my earlier answer. And what I told her was that one way to think about the subthreads of Source that spawn and manage souls, which is typically the oversoul level, is that they are Source. The oversoul level subthreads of Source consciousness are Source. Source created them. Remember, Source is a multi-threaded, multi-level composite consciousness. There's an entire family tree of parent thread, child thread, more child threads in a big family tree of subthreads of Source. But every single one of those threads of Source consciousness is Source consciousness. It's just a strategy to multitask, to be able to be doing a lot of stuff at the same time. Source is creating a multitude of realities and then experiencing them. There are millions and trillions and billions of threads of itself that are engaged in creating and maintaining realities, and there are millions and billions and trillions of threads of itself that are playing the roles, are incarnated or whatever, immersed in the experience of all these realities. It's all Source. It's just a strategy to do a lot of things at once. This is how it multitasks. So that's just the way it works. That's the way Source works. So that's my perspective on today's question. If you're enjoying these question and answer videos, you might like to join me in my upcoming live online question and answer session this coming Monday, October 15th. Check out the link below this video to find out more details about how to join in on that. And if you have any thoughts or comments or questions about this particular subject, please share them in the comments below the video and my YouTube channel, or in the comments below the article, the written version of this on my website, depending on where you're at. That's it. See you in the next video.